Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Today channel. Thomas confessing to Ridge the truth that Douglas is Ridge's bio son. Thomas furiously attacks Ridge for betrayal. Unless there is a last-minute adjustment, we will have a brand new episode of Bold on Monday, September 1st, despite the fact that it is Labor Day. It's meant to be a new one at the moment. Sheila Carter is playing a foolish game by attempting to persuade Luna Nozawa to see reason. Because Luna is insane, Sheila won't have any luck. The battle between Liam Spencer and Carter Walton over Hope Logan gets more intense. Liam essentially tries to persuade Hope to forget Carter and pick him to reunite Beth's family by telling her that their daughter, Beth Spencer, is everything to them. Although it's a bit of a guilt trip, Liam will stop at nothing. Thomas comes back and addresses Brooke and Luna's pregnancy test. After being away for months, like a year, Thomas is back in Los Angeles on Tuesday, September 2nd. Matt Atkinson has returned, and he is ecstatic about Ridge and Taylor Hayes' wedding. Thomas approaches Taylor's workplace and surprises her. Thomas inquires about Taylor's marriage to Ridge, and she is overjoyed to see her son. Taylor informs Thomas that Steffi Forrester intends to attend this event and that Eric Forrester is siding with Brooke Logan. Taylor is adamant that she and Ridge will not be separated by Brooke. I believe Taylor will report on what Brooke and Katie Logan have been saying and doing. Brooke's warning from Thomas. To his credit, Thomas doesn't simply arrive in town with resentment for Brooke. All of this, in my opinion, is a result of what Taylor is saying and Brooke is doing. Thomas is therefore rather irritated to learn of Brooke and Eric's meddling. Thomas blasts Brooke as he makes his way to Forrester Creations. Brooke is informed by Thomas that his father will wed his mother. Don't try to come between them ever again, he cautions Brooke. As he says this, Katie is listening with disbelief. Because she knows she has already done this and isn't going to back down, Brooke is giving Thomas an open glare. She has demonstrated that she will stop at nothing to win Ridge back. How far will Thomas go to ensure that it doesn't happen, then? Ridge versus Thomas, Brooke's audacious step. There will be a match between Thomas and Ridge on Wednesday, September 3rd. I do wonder whether Thomas learns from his father that he intends to shatter Taylor's heart by calling off the engagement. If so, I'm expecting to see Thomas furiously yelling at Ridge. As you recall, their father is preparing to shatter Taylor's heart, despite having told Steffi that he wouldn't. In other words, if Ridge wasn't going to stay with Taylor, Steffi didn't want him to get connected with her. Because that's what he does, Ridge is now breaking the pledges he made. Lee is quite suspicious about Luna's frequent disappearances. I wonder how long it will take Lee to realize the harsh truth, since she is not falling for Luna's falsehoods. Brooke is pushed by Katie on BNB. Brooke had a heart-to-heart with Katie. She advises Brooke to go to Taylor and tell her the truth because Ridge isn't coming clean. We've returned to this topic after I mentioned in a previous video that I believed Brooke would do it. Ridge might get irritated about this. Or perhaps he thinks, oh, alright. I don't have to do that anymore, though. Naturally, Taylor wouldn't believe Brooke and would confront Ridge, forcing him to either come clean and face the wrath of everyone on that side of the family or back away from Brooke so he doesn't have to tell Taylor the truth. When Taylor demands a wedding, Eric steps in. Taylor is pressuring Ridge to arrange a wedding date as soon as possible on Thursday, September 4th. Taylor wants to lock Ridge down because she knows he poses a threat to her happiness and future, but Brooke is dragging him away. Eric, meantime, advises Ridge not to let Thomas or Steffi to dictate his destiny. Ironically, Eric tries to dictate to Ridge what his future ought to hold. Eric keeps telling Ridge that Brooke is the person Ridge should be with, but I don't think he sees the contradiction there. Ridge probably hoped to split up with Taylor and get away with it without the kids noticing, but that isn't going to happen. Brooke's perseverance and Ridge's indecision. After speaking with Thomas about Brooke, Ridge, and Taylor on Friday, September 5th, Eric is still unsure. Eric's remarks are causing Ridge to struggle with himself on Friday. Ridge has returned to his wishy-washy waffler persona, and he understands how his children feel about this. Additionally, Brooke makes an effort to become closer to Ridge throughout this first week. And reminds him that he pledged to make things right when he was in Italy. I wonder if Ridge will break his word to Brooke or if she will have to handle the unpleasant things with Taylor. Thomas is adamant that he will not allow Brooke to separate his parents. However, he could be forced to accept it in the end. You never know, Thomas might try to break up Brooke and Ridge by pulling a shady prank like he has in the past. Until Ridge tells her the truth or Brooke shows up and tells her the truth that Ridge isn't telling her, Taylor will not stop pushing. On Bold and the Beautiful, Luna's scheme intensifies. She is determined to give Will the impression that she is pregnant in order to conceive his child. If she doesn't get 2 lines showing that she is knocked up, we'll see what happens with that pregnancy test and what she does. It may be quite enlightening if Lee decides she can't believe what Luna is saying and decides to follow her granddaughter instead. She will be incensed, particularly after learning that Sheila is complicit in all of this. Ridge is under a lot of stress. 2 sides are exerting pressure on him. How is he going to proceed? Will becomes more anxious. This unidentified woman will be sending him additional texts. Liam is battling for Hope and making his case. I am awaiting the interaction and check-in between Hope and Thomas. After advising Thomas it was too fast to get engaged, I wonder whether he will be shocked by how soon she became engaged to Carter. Thomas might let Steffi know that Brooke is having problems separating their parents. On Wednesday, September 10th, Bridget Forrester will be back. In any case, I would like to know when we will be getting married. Lee chastises Thomas, Brooke confronts him, and Thomas returns. Return of Thomas Forrester. First, let's discuss Thomas's comeback. Los Angeles is where the young man will appear. First, anticipate the designer's reunion with Taylor Hayes, his mother. The mother and boy embrace with excitement in a promotional video. Thomas then explains that he is back in town for the wedding of Taylor and Ridge Forrester. Confrontation of Brooke Logan. Thomas's next task is to approach Brooke and provide a warning. Brooke is working at a desk in her office when the young man arrives. Katie Logan is also present, but she only watches the discussion from a distance. The blonde is warned by Thomas to avoid Ridge and Taylor at all costs. Regarding Thomas's warning, Brooke doesn't say much in the weekly preview clip. The blonde may remain silent. Ridge has already crushed her heart, especially as Taylor's wedding draws near. Brooke believes that she and Ridge are meant to be together. Brooke is still waiting even though he promised to make things right. When will she ever figure out what's going on and be content without the Waffle King? Thomas Forrester's conscience for what felt like an eternity finally demanded its audience on a night when the Los Angeles sky wept with a rare, torrential rain, as if the heavens themselves were preparing to wash away the foundation of a lie that had propped up their world for far too long. The setting was Ridge's art studio, a sanctuary usually filled with the scent of turpentine and the quiet hum of creation, but tonight it was charged with a different kind of energy, a palpable dread that clung to the air thicker than the storm's humidity. Thomas stood before his father, not as the often manipulative, sometimes broken man he had been, but as a hollowed-out vessel finally ready to be filled with the agonizing relief of authenticity, his hands trembling not from the chill of the room but from the seismic weight of the confession he was about to unleash. "Dad," he began, his voice a ragged whisper that was almost swallowed by the drumming of rain on the skylight, a word that felt both like a plea and an apology, and Ridge, who had been studying a canvas with a critical eye, turned, his designer's intuition immediately sensing the profound shift in the atmosphere, the way a barometer feels the impending hurricane. "There's something I have to tell you. Something I should have told you years ago. I've held on to this, and it's poisoned everything I've touched. It's the reason behind so much of the chaos, the reason I clung to hope with such a desperate sickness, the reason I used Douglas as a pawn in a game I never should have been playing." He took a shuddering breath, the oxygen feeling like shards of glass in his lungs, his eyes glistening with unshed tears that mirrored the water streaks on the windows, and Ridge, now fully attentive, his brow furrowed in concern and a dawning apprehension, moved to speak, to offer some paternal comfort, but Thomas held up a hand, stopping him. This had to be a purging, a complete and uninterrupted expulsion of the venom. "Douglas," Thomas said, the name catching in his throat, and he looked toward the window, as if seeking strength from the storm's fury. "My son, our son. The pronoun hung in the space between them, a grenade with the pin already pulled. Ridge's expression shifted from concern to pure, uncomprehending confusion. "What are you talking about, Thomas? Of course he's your son." But Thomas was already shaking his head, a slow, painful pendulum of negation. "No. Biologically. No. The night of Caroline's death, it wasn't like we thought. The medical reports, the timing. Dad, I'm not his biological father." He forced the words out, each one a betrayal, a self-flagellation. "Caroline and I, we never, it was a lie, a story we concocted to protect her, to protect me, to make sense of something that was already falling apart. But the truth is that the night Douglas was conceived, it was with you." The silence that followed was more deafening than any thunderclap that had rattled the windows moments before. It was a vacuum, sucking all sound, all air, all reason from the room. Ridge stood frozen, a statue of disbelief, his mind visibly racing, rewinding the tape of his life, of Caroline's pregnancy, of the joyous announcement, of holding that baby for the first time, believing him to be his grandson, of the complicated, often distant relationship he'd had with the boy he believed was his grandson, all of it now tilting on its axis, rendered a fraudulent narrative. "That's not possible," Ridge finally breathed, the words a weak defense against an undeniable truth he could see blazing in the tortured honesty of his son's eyes. "Thomas, what have you done?" The question wasn't angry yet, it was stunned, emerging from a place of sheer, world-shattering shock. "I perpetuated a lie," Thomas wept, the tears finally breaking free, tracing paths down his cheeks that were the physical map of his internal fracture. "I was selfish and scared, and I saw a way to keep a piece of Caroline, to have a family, and I took it. I took him from you. I stole your son and called him my own. I let you believe you were a grandfather when you were a father all over again. I watched you struggle to connect with him, and I knew why. I knew it was because some deep, primal part of you recognized the truth even when your mind didn't, and I did nothing. I said nothing. I am so sorry, Dad. I am so desperately, unforgivably sorry." He collapsed into a nearby chair, his body folding under the weight of his guilt, and Ridge simply stared, his own eyes wide with a maelstrom of emotions, betrayal so acute it was a physical pain in his chest, a dizzying reel of memories contextualized, a fierce and sudden surge of paternal love for the little boy he now knew was his own, and a profound, devastating grief for all the lost years, the first steps he hadn't rushed to celebrate as a father, the scraped knees he hadn't kissed, the bedtime stories he hadn't read with the knowing joy of authorship. All this time, Ridge whispered, his voice cracking, moving slowly to the window, watching the rain obscure the world, a perfect metaphor for the lie that had blurred his reality for so long. "My boy. Douglas is my son." The words, spoken aloud in his own voice, made it real, and the reality was simultaneously a beautiful gift and a brutal indictment. He turned back to Thomas, and the anger came then, hot and righteous. How could you keep this from me? From him? Do you have any idea what you've denied him? What you've denied us?" Thomas could only nod, accepting the fury, deserving every scalding word. "I know. I have to live with that every day. And I will for the rest of my life. But I couldn't. I couldn't live with the lie anymore. You deserve the truth. Douglas deserves the truth. He deserves to know his real father, to have the relationship with you that was always meant to be his." In that moment, amidst the wreckage of trust and the howl of the storm, something fragile began to emerge from the ruins. It was not forgiveness, that would be a long, hard road paved with pain and difficult conversations, but it was the raw, unvarnished truth, and in its terrifying clarity, there was a foundation. Ridge looked at his son, the man who had committed the ultimate betrayal, yet who was now broken and repentant before him, and he saw not a monster, but a tragically flawed human being who had, in the most catastrophic way possible, finally chosen the right path. The confession was an earthquake that had leveled the landscape of their family, but as the aftershock subsided and the rain began to lighten, promising a clearer sky, it left behind a barren but clean slate, upon which a new, honest, and painfully earned future for a father, his son, and the little boy who connected them, could finally begin to be built. Ridge Forrester's office, usually saturated with the scent of expensive leather and creative ambition, was now thick with the acrid fumes of impending betrayal, a toxic perfume that Thomas Forrester detected the moment he crossed the threshold, his homecoming euphoria evaporating like mist under a brutal sun. His return to Los Angeles, meant to be a joyous surprise celebration of his parents' long-awaited reunion, had curdled into a mission of protective fury within mere hours, a transformation sparked by his mother's radiant but nervously defensive account of her impending wedding and poisoned by Brooke Logan's defiant, unrepentant glare when he had rightfully warned her to cease her meddling. But that was merely the prelude. The main act of this familial tragedy unfolded now, as he stood before his father, the man he had spent a lifetime idolizing, only to see the familiar, waffling indecision in Ridge's eyes, a look Thomas knew heralded heartbreak for Taylor Hayes. The cheerful banter about wedding plans died in Thomas's throat, replaced by a cold, dawning horror as he deciphered the subtext of his father's evasive answers, the too casual shrugs, the way Ridge's gaze flickered toward the door as if expecting, or perhaps hoping for, an interruption from the very woman who sought to dismantle this fragile happiness. "You're not going through with it, are you?" Thomas finally uttered, the question not really a question at all but an accusation that hung in the air between them, heavy and damning. All that talk about finally being sure, about Mom being your destiny, it was just more Forrester speak. "You're going to call it off." Ridge's attempt at paternal authority, a weak protestation of "Thomas, you don't understand the complexities," was eviscerated by the volcanic rage that erupted from his son, a years-long torrent of witnessing his mother's pain at the hands of this man's weakness and Brooke's manipulations. "Don't you dare tell me about complexity. I understand a promise. I understand you looked Steffi in the eye and swore you wouldn't do this. You swore you wouldn't hurt Mom again. You told her she was it, that after all the back and forth, the decades of chaos, you were finally choosing her." Thomas's voice escalated, each word a hammer blow on the anvil of Ridge's betrayal. "She believed you. We all believed you. And for what? So you could cave the second Brooke decided she wanted her toy back? After everything she's done to you, to us, to this family, her pull is so magnetic that you're willing to shatter your own family, to break the heart of the one woman who has always seen you as a king, for what? A few moments of validation from a woman who will never be satisfied?" The fury was not merely about the current betrayal, it was the culmination of a lifetime of pattern, a legacy of fractured families and collateral damage that Thomas himself had been both a perpetrator and victim of, and in this moment, he was unleashed, a righteous avenger for the mother who had endured too much and the sister who had extracted a sacred vow. "This isn't just about you and your tangled love life, Dad. This is about Steffi, who stood by you. This is about me, coming back here thinking my family was finally whole, finally stable. And it's about Mom, who is upstairs right now, probably picking out china patterns, utterly blind to the knife you're sharpening for her back." He advanced, his frame trembling with a passion that dwarfed Ridge's conflicted passivity. "You made a vow to her. You stood in front of your children and promised a future. And now, because Eric is in your ear preaching the gospel of Brooke, and because Brooke herself is whispering empty promises from Italy in the other, you're going to renege? You're going to reduce the most significant relationship of your life to a mistake?" The mention of Brooke's persistence, her audacious reminder of a promise Ridge made to her in the shadow of the Colosseum, was the final spark. "She is poison," Thomas roared, his voice echoing off the sleek walls of the office. "She will consume you, and us, and everything we've tried to build until there's nothing left but her ego. And you're just going to let it happen. Again." In that searing instant, Thomas saw the entire, miserable cycle laid bare, Ridge's weakness, Brooke's entitled pursuit, Taylor's inevitable devastation, and the children left to pick up the pieces of their parents' eternal drama. His confrontation wasn't just an argument, it was a last stand, a desperate attempt to shield his mother from a pain he knew with visceral certainty she would not survive intact this time. The love he held for his father warred with a blistering contempt for the man's cowardice, and in his eyes, Ridge could see not just his son's anger, but the reflection of his own failings, magnified and unforgivable. The betrayal was absolute, And Thomas's fury was the furious, righteous storm that promised to leave no one unscathed in its wake, least of all the man who dared to call love a game that could be won with a lie.